of blame toward black people for being the cause of how white people treat.
So lovely, so I came across this video on my For You and I thought to share where this pink-colored woman is actually revealing why pink-colored people actually chose people that looks like me to get them enslaved rather than choosing other people. And I actually find her stitches quite interesting. I decided to actually put it up here so that we all can see. I'm just going to roll the clip as well as some of other stitches I was able to put together. Please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So lovelies, wanna just, join me to hear from pink-colored people and as well as why they feel this white guilt inside of them. Alright lovelies, let's dive into it.
I am trying to get real with myself and with other white people, and it is painful work. There's a whole lot of blame toward black people for being the cause of how white people treat them, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. I decided to take a closer look at slavery, since that's such a big topic in the United States. There has been slavery all over the world forever, and all colors of people have enslaved other colors of people for as long as we know about. But the transatlantic slave trade, in which Europeans brought African and Caribbean black people to the United States to be free labor in the new colonies before they were really the United States, is a whole different story of slavery. Slavery historically had to do with who won and who lost a war, who was convenient, who stumbled by at the wrong time, and so it wasn't specifically race-based. So why did these white Europeans choose black people to enslave? Because their physical differences from whites made it easier to create lies that they were biologically inferior. They invented science to defend this. It was easier to make these people who looked so different from us less human. And that lie made it easier to justify torture, rape, family separation, and death on a massive scale. And it made them, quite frankly, easier to identify if they tried to escape. The legacy didn't disappear when slavery ended. Eugenics came along and fed the racial superiority notion of whiteness, and it influenced the Nazi narrative along with the racial one. It carried over into segregation, Jim Crow, housing, policing, incarceration, education, all of that. If we're ever going to fix what's broken, we need to get curious enough to name how it got broken in the first place. White people need to get curious so we can say no more, not on my watch. It was 1607 when English settlers were sent by the Virginia Company of England to found Jamestown in Virginia, the first colony in the Americas. The goal of the Virginia Company was to get rich. The settlers had their own agendas like religious freedom and escaping tyranny, but the Virginia Company was their ride. 12 years later, in 1619, the first ship carrying African slaves got there. That was no coincidence. That was 1600's prime delivery, a gift from the Virginia Company. They had been watching Spain and Portugal profit from enslaved Africans for many years, since the 1400s, and they swiped their business model. They also used indentured servants. Some of my ancestors were indentured servants. But there's some disagreement about whether the African slaves were originally indentured, but it didn't really matter because they ended up being chattel. White indentured servants had contracts, and they had a shot at freedom after 4 to 7 years usually. When their time was up, they often got land or goods to help them start fresh. Black Africans were enslaved for life, and to ensure that they stayed that way, the colonists made laws about it. If your mama was a slave, you were a slave, your kids were slaves. There really wasn't a way out. But that was the plan all along, because think of the business aspects of it. Once you bought a person, you never had to buy them again. You never had to pay them except to keep them fed well enough that they didn't die. And you could breed them. It's disgusting. To make people feel okay about all this, language became peppered with things like, they're childlike and they need our guidance. Does that ring a bell with anything you might hear today? Like, they just need more discipline at home. They need stronger role models. It's all victim blaming, dog whistles, gaslighting, and it's still part of the culture. And it carries down from way the hell back then. The colonists passed laws to make sure slaves did not learn to read because an educated slave was bad for business. Fast forward to Reagan's trickle-down economics theory. That never worked when it came to wealth. The rich just hoarded their money. But racism trickles. It always has. And it can be so effective that white people don't recognize it as racism because we aren't looking for it. We're too comfortable. Get curious and follow for episode 3, when race became law, the unnatural birth of whiteness. I've never owned anyone. My neighbors, as far as I know, have never been owned by anyone. But the people who say we don't owe any reparations for the Civil War are ignoring something really huge. Or maybe they just don't know. Some people already got reparations. White people. White enslavers were paid for losing their human property. The actual people who were raped, tortured, whipped, and sold, and worse, were promised land to get a fresh start after the war, but they got nothing. When slavery was abolished, Congress paid nearly $1 million, which is 30 million in today's bucks, to white enslavers as compensation for losing their property in a war they lost. If a freed person didn't hit the road fast enough, they risked being re-enslaved under new laws that were just workarounds for all these white people losing their slaves. After the Civil War ended, Union General Sherman set aside 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land for black families to start new lives on. Up to 40 acres each. The Army loaned out mules to help them work the land. That's where the phrase 40 acres and a mule comes from. Black people were already working some of this land when Lincoln was assassinated and Andrew Johnson became president. Well, Johnson reversed the order. He gave the land back to the same Confederates who had just tried to destroy the country. The freed people were evicted. So they made all these things into crimes that were non-crimes. They were things like, if a black person didn't have a job, that was a crime. If a black person couldn't prove that they had a job, that was a crime. You could get arrested for that and a lot of other ridiculous things. But once you were in jail, you could be leased out as labor for private profit. This system of convict leasing allowed white landowners and businesses to replace slavery with something just as violent, just as profitable as slavery. No wonder there are still Confederate flags all across the South. Even after slavery was abolished, black Americans were not safe. Public lynchings became a regular threat. They were a form of terror used to keep freed people in their place. They were planned events announced in advance so everybody could attend. They were held in broad daylight. White families brought their children to watch black people being hanged, tortured, brutally murdered. It was a festival. People sold food. There were postcards made. People could buy postcards of the mutilated bodies hanging from trees and mail them in the mail or keep them as souvenirs. This country took care of Civil War criminals and punished the ones the war was supposed to free. And there was a lot more abuse I just can't fit into this video. Next time I'm going to talk about the stuff that happened in relation to the Great Depression and World War II. And then after that, I'll have one on civil rights, the era when I was growing up, how it all ties in to the racism that is part and parcel of our grand land today. White people, you especially need to get curious. Join me in this research, and you'll find that people are willing and able to come in with their education and their experience to help you learn. You just have to be open to it. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable.
And I kept it very brief and vague on purpose. So yesterday I posted a video giving a very basic definition in my own words of what white privilege is. And I kept it very brief and vague on purpose because I had a feeling people would start arguing in the comments, which they did. But I also thought it was super interesting how many people were commenting that I have white guilt, that I want to be black, and that I'm dying for the attention of the black community. First of all, yes, I have white guilt. You should too. Anyone who grows up with the knowledge that they have systematic advantages over other people just because of historical events and historical discrimination should feel a little guilty about that. Whether or not they contributed to that is a whole other thing, but you're reaping the benefits of it. People act like white guilt is something to be ashamed of, but if you use it in the right way and you use it to further reduce injustice, it's a good thing. And when people talk about systematic injustice and things like that, and they say, oh, everyone's equal, and this is happening in the comments, there's no racism anymore, everyone's equal, obviously don't understand what systematic means. And I'm going to give an anecdotal story just to really hit this on the head. I am white, and on both sides of my family, we do not have any massive generational wealth. My mom's father is the only one of my 4 grandparents who we got any sort of generational wealth inherited from. And 99% of the wealth that we inherited from my grandfather was from selling his house. My grandfather was born in 1926 in rural North Carolina, and he was a 6'3" white man with blue eyes. And other than being white, my grandfather didn't have that many privileges. He was one of like 7 children. His mom didn't even get to high school level education, and his dad never went to college. They were not privileged in most other ways that we define privilege, but he was a white male in a very, very racist country. What his whiteness allowed him to do was work his way through college. At the time, there were colleges that weren't accepting black people, and he was accepted to college as long as he could pay for it. And he ended up getting a law degree and becoming very successful. And again, never hoarded any significant wealth, but bought a house outside of Washington, D.C. in the 50s. In a neighborhood that was redlined. And actually my mom, who was born in the 60s, remembers in the 70s when the first black family moved into their neighborhood, because it had literally been sectioned off and realtors would not sell to black families. And my mom, who is 58 years old, went to a year of segregated school. So for all of you saying it was so long ago, everyone has equal rights now, get over it. My mom remembers when the first black student joined her class in the 70s in Alexandria, Virginia. In 2015, my grandfather died, and we sold his house that he bought for around $100,000 in the 50s, and we sold it for $1 million. That money was divided among his children, and my family was able to get out of a lot of debt, and it completely reset my ability to go to private versus public school, my ability to afford tutors, my ability to become the educated person that I am. And it was all really because I have a white grandfather. Let me finish. Had my grandfather been black and had all of the other skills and background that he had, he couldn't have gone to the schools that he went to. He wouldn't have been hired in the jobs that he was. And he couldn't have bought the house that he did that, 65 years later, put his family out of debt. So if anyone tries to tell you it's not that deep, it really is that deep. It goes so far back. Any small privilege that a white person has is probably, to some degree, due to their whiteness. And if you are a white person who has roots in the South, you definitely should have white guilt, and you definitely should be doing the work to understand how your privilege affects the people around you and how you can help level the playing field. Because you, almost 100%, have an ancestor who owned black people. So yes, I have white guilt. Yes, I'm aware of my status as a white woman, and I'm aware of the parts of my identity that are privileged and the parts that aren't. But saying that you have a certain type of privilege doesn't mean that you have every privilege. It just means that that aspect of your identity is favored by society. So I can talk about being a white woman, and that makes me privileged. But if I talk about being a woman, that is actually a disadvantage in a lot of ways. And everyone tried to get all particular about these specific situations where a black person might have a privilege or a woman might have a privilege over a man. Those are isolated situations you're bringing up. We're talking about large-scale, mass, systematic issues. And It's a lot deeper than just, oh, I felt racism as a white person at one point. Fine, yeah, all of us can experience what feels like discrimination based on race, but that doesn't mean that it's systematically affecting you and stopping you and your families from catching up. That's really what it is. Now, yeah, legally, black people and white people should have the same exact rights and privileges. But they're playing catch up, because if my family, like I said, had been black, we would never have gotten out of debt in 2015. I would never have been able to afford the school that I went to and live the lifestyle that I'm living right now. And that's because of effects from over 70 years ago. So thanks for listening. And yeah, white guilt's okay.
White supremacy relies on having an uneducated population, and that is exactly what Trump's administration in the White House is creating today. Anti-intellectualism isn't just concerning because individuals don't know how to read or write at a high level. It's concerning because they don't know how to recognize patterns that are happening in society. They don't want you to recognize the historic danger of banning books, or realize that in 2023 alone, more than 3,000 books were banned, mostly about sexuality, race, and gender. They don't want you to recognize that erasing history is dangerous, like how Florida changed slavery to involuntary relocation, or that the GI Bill that built the American middle class, including my family, excluded black veterans. Why? Because if you understood the way that racism is built into the foundation of this country, you would demand change. You would have to, if you have any sort of conscience. From education to housing to policing, go back 30, 50, 70, 90 years and the pattern is all there. White supremacy needs you to be uneducated and complacent in your current status. So what is the most radical thing that you can do today, especially as a white person? Get educated, read a book, stop dismissing critical race theory as woke propaganda, and actually look at the foundation of what we are saying, and you will literally be shocked. Let's talk about who the American dream was never meant for. From the start, the American dream was a myth. In the 1930s, the US government literally drew lines around primarily black neighborhoods in order to deny them loans, a process today known as redlining. Not only was this harmful because it kept black Americans out of homes, but it also denied them access to generational wealth. Meanwhile, throughout the 20th century, black workers and immigrants were exploited in factories, in mines, and in fields, while the rich got even richer. Not to mention union busting and wage theft kept families in poverty for decades, and we can even see those effects today. It's not that the American dream is broken, it's that it is a myth for the majority of people. It was meant for white middle class people who had the resources to try to elevate themselves to the top 1%. So by supporting billionaires like Elon Musk or like Mark Zuckerberg, you are supporting a system that actively hurts minorities as well as the everyday people just like you. It's time for us to rebuild a system that is truly fair and equitable for everybody. Peace and love!
Like seriously, lovelies, when I actually saw the first teacher report here, I find it interesting. And I decided to put it here so that we all can discourse, because that actually cleared a lot of things going on in my mind. So she talked about how colored people actually chose, people that looks like me to enslave. She made a mention of they did that because of the color of the skin. They did that because they saw that, okay, these other people are this way and we are actually this way. Let's look for how to conquer them. And the truth of this whole thing is that even as we speak, up till this day, skin color has always been a major reason of discrimination. Even when some pan-colored people chose to ignore that fact. They are so easy to talk about how they don't see skin. Oh my god, I don't see skin. I don't know what you're talking about. But meanwhile, someone's skin color has always been a definition of how the society actually treat this person. The same thing applicable to one of the stitch I came across one time. I think I actually posted it here. It's a long time ago, sometime 3 months back, where this man, Craig, that is his name, he was actually on a podcast. He happens to be a white man. He's known for going to these colleges for college debates. And he was on a podcast, and one of his podcasts, he was like, there's a question that was asked, and this question is, would you prefer to be flown by a white pilot or a black pilot? And he was like, oh my god, that he can never flew, he can never be allowed to be flown on a plane by a black pilot. And the podcast was like, what do you mean? Is it that you meant that because this person has a color of, this person's color actually describes the person's professionalism? And he was like, no, apart from that, he don't really feel comfortable on a plane flown by a black person, that he would rather not travel than to be flown by, that he feels more safe, more secure, more professional by a white person. And this was the same man who was on the podcast talking about how, skin does not really matter, it's the character. And now this lady that I stitched her video is still saying the same thing. My point is, why is it that some of these pan-colored people who often talk about how they don't see skin, oh my god, they don't see color, oh my god, they see character, but they're so quick to defend that fact, even when they knew deep inside of them that skin is actually a criteria. Like, it's one of the major reasons there is discrimination. And it's not something that actually started today. It is something that has always been there. It is something that has been there even during slavery. Sometimes I got on a discussion with my, granddad. I've talked about him here multiple times. Someone that actually grew with my grandparents, and he was like, I asked him, why was it so possible for black people to be enslaved, and some group of people came to Africa, enslaved so many people and take them for a free labor? Why was it so easy for these people to do? And my grandparents was that. It was like, these people came into people that looks like me because of, we are so nice. We are so accommodating. And black people often think that because of the way our heart is, we often mistake other people to just be as genuine as people that looks like us. That is why these people were able to penetrate, manipulate, and took away people for enslavement. And he was like, they teamed up with other colonies, and that was how Africa was actually colonized and overcome. And the thing is that the people who existed here on this earth first was actually people that looks like me. But getting colonized by people that came from you, because it is actually said that every other race started from black people, is a mystery that needs to be studied. Like, seriously. That's why I try as much as I can to actually invest more on historical fact and try to know more or two things. Anyway, when I saw this, I thought I was just going to put it up here. Why not just leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please, lovely, do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So, lovely, if you have not subscribed to this channel, do your girl a huge favor to click on the subscription button, like, and I will see you, lovelies, when I upload the next here for educational and informative purposes. So, lovelies, please share, subscribe, like, and I will see you, lovelies, when I upload the next one.